Hi, hi, hi. So, welcome to the Microdose Diet Podcast. I am Peggy van de Plassche, and today we have an amazing guest. I practiced her name because I really wanted it to be perfect. So, she is Alejandra Crisafulli. Did I say it
Yes,
properly?
so good.
Oh,
Perfect.
thank you so much. And you probably know her as the baller coach, which is easier to pronounce, but I'm not sure
Mhm.
I still pronounced it properly. But
No, that was
anyway,
good. Yeah, the baller coach.
the
Yes.
baller coach. Thank you, Alejandra. So you have dedicated really your career to help high achievers really break
Mhm.
through mental barriers and unlock their full potential
Yeah.
because you want them to achieve lasting success,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
that's the
Yes.
only way to do that. And I really, really love your approach because I would say selfishly, it really aligns beautifully with what I do, the microdose diet philosophy, which is, um, personal growth through intentional mindset shifts and holistic
Mhm.
well-being. So we have a lot in common. So today we're going to discuss plenty of things, but my first question is, where is the name the baller coach coming from? Because I love it. It's really fun.
Thank you. That's so funny. Yeah, it actually came from I was working with a few clients several years ago, and we were doing kind of an intimate retreat where we were f working on their business, and I was at the point where I was looking to rebrand.
Okay.
And my coaching business was called Coach with Alejandra at the
Mhm.
time. And it just felt like, this is going to be so much bigger than just myself. So I wanted to remove my name specifically to it.
Gotcha.
And as I was with these clients and we're working on their business, and one of them just says to me out of the blue, Alejandra, you're such a baller. But not in the traditional sense of what a baller means. And the
Yeah.
moment she said it, I was like, and all the other clients were like, yeah, you're a baller.
Oh.
And it just kind of stuck since then and really just hit me. And but when I say different than how you might traditionally label the baller, for me, what it means is that a baller chooses to win the fight against
Uh-huh.
fear, to speak through truth instead of falsehood, to promote wisdom rather than confusion, and to really focus on faith beyond obstacles.
Very
And
nice.
and that's what it really means to me to be a baller.
Oh, that's great. And so you're focusing really on career coaching, high achievers. So,
Mhm.
um, what really inspired you to decide to focus on that niche in
Yeah,
particular? Yeah.
yeah. I myself am very much so a high achiever. In addition to my coaching business, my husband and I also own a multi-million dollar coffee company here in San Diego,
Oh,
which is
very
where we're
cool.
from. So we have 6 locations, 158 employees.
Amazing.
So entrepreneurship is just in my blood. I
Hmm.
love it. I thrive off of it. It's not for the lighthearted.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
There's many ups and downs in it, which is part of, there is so much passion and purpose in it, but there's a lot of hardship through it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to help women is in this particular area of entrepreneurship and being a high performer,
Mhm.
because so many can run themselves into the ground because
Yes.
it's not for the lighthearted. And so
Yeah.
I'm in it myself. I live it, I breathe it, and I wanted to help.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah,
I love that you're really focusing on, female entrepreneur,
yeah,
high achiever, because there are still specifics, between a
yeah,
man, a woman. Are you a stay-at-home mom versus an entrepreneur
yeah.
versus an executive? Like you still see different realities.
Yes,
Um, at the same time, I'm sure you would have seen commonalities, but I have seen, some similar blocks
yeah,
between people across different cross function. But
yeah.
with your audience and your niche, what would be, I would say, the most common mental blocks you see female high achiever entrepreneur face?
Um, main blocks. Number one is being too overdriven,
Ah,
being such a
interesting.
driver.
Hmm.
Driver, people pleasing.
That yes.
Uh-huh. People pleasing. And surprisingly, a lack of confidence, like a
Yeah,
doubt in
yeah.
themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause-
So
yeah.
let's look at these three: overdriven, people pleaser, lack of confidence. I've seen maybe more of a commonality between people pleaser and lack of confidence
Yep.
versus overdriven.
Yeah.
So depending on their blocks, or let's say I'm coming to coach with you, and let's say I fall into bucket one. Actually, I'm probably falling into bucket two, but let's say bucket one. What would you recommend? Or do you work with your clients? I think it's important for people who listen because they don't always understand what does a coach do, How
Do.
do they help
Yeah.
me?
And
Yeah.
and there's so many different types of coaches
On
and
top
coaching
of
out there
that.
now. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so you want to focus on the driver one.
And then after we can go on
And
the
then we'll go
people
into the
pleaser,
okay.
if you don't mind. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. With that driver, kind of overdriver,
Yeah.
it usually stems from a need to be validated or to have some kind of approval,
Mm,
and that or attention in some way
gotcha.
that comes from typically, as most things do, a
Mm,
childhood experience where dad only gave attention, validation, or some kind of love and affirmation when they performed really well.
gotcha. Gotcha.
Or mom gave only that love and attention when performance was done high, high, high.
Mm, mhm.
And so there's never a place where there's just a place to rest.
Yeah.
Some kind of goal or intention is reached. They
Mhm,
drove themselves to the point of exhaustion to get there, but then there's never the receiving of that
mhm,
because
mhm.
then it's like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
Okay, next one.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. Okay, next one. And so it creates this, what I call a 360 cycle, kind of like a dog chasing its tail
Yeah.
where you're doing a whole bunch of work, maybe think you're going to be changing something in yourself or have a better outcome, but really you just end up in the same place you were
Mhm,
before, and it
mhm.
all stems from seeking this validation or
Mm.
attention.
So,
So,
how do you break the cycle for an over a driver? Is it well, first, I guess self-awareness, realizing they're doing it and why they're doing it, but how do you break that pattern? Because
yeah, such a great
it's ingrained. I guess
ingrained.
they've
It's
been doing that
ingrained.
since they were
Yeah.
5 years
Yeah.
old, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I coach on is this 180 method that I've
Mm.
developed. So, a 180 literally means that you completely change, like you turn the direction in which you're
Love it.
going,
Mm.
and your personality actually changes into something different than what it
Mhm,
was before. So, all that before was a personality, the driver is a very much personality driven. So
mhm,
this 180 method that I walk people through actually helps people have healing rather than dealing with their
mhm.
life.
Love it. Yeah.
So dealing things might be things like, well, I have this awareness that I do this. Okay, I'm going to stop doing it, or I'm going to convince myself that I've done doing it, or maybe I'll do a lot of affirmations or journaling or these kinds of things. But really, that just is more of a driver personality, and you end up managing and dealing instead of
Absolutely.
actually healing
Absolutely. Yeah.
the root cause.
Yeah.
So that's how the 180 works is we get to the root cause, create healing at that level, and it shifts or changes your personality in which you're still you, but that desire that
Yeah.
drove you before is no longer there.
Yeah. I love it. That makes so much sense. And do you use special tools? And I'm a big fan of tapping, but do you have like in your 180 a bit of techniques you're using to heal?
No, not necessarily techniques. It really comes down to how we're designed as human beings. And
Mhm.
I mean that differently than like the whole human design thing.
Mhm.
God designed us in a particular way. We're human, which is all of our physical self, that's the mind, that's behaviors, that's personality, all of that falls under the human aspect of us. But then we're also a being,
Yeah.
which is our spirit, and that's that direct connection or link to God. And so most of the time what happens is we end up functioning only out of that human perspective
Mm.
and completely disconnect from the greatest power that we have, which is our being. So the tool, so to speak, isn't necessarily like a physical tool.
Understand.
It's healing to the point where you're shifting out of being a human doing into back to a human being. So it's reconnecting to your being is the tool. And it really teaches you how to be able to show up in a very natural way,
Mhm.
that you're not forcing yourself
Yeah.
to
It's
do the things.
authenticity, going back to your
Exactly.
essence when you're not program conditioned to jump to please daddy, mommy, and after whoever is
Exactly.
amazing.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
well, that's a good transition to people pleasing because technically it's a bit the same
Hmm.
reaction, but
Yeah.
what's your thought? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it is very much so the same reaction. You know, people pleasing again still comes, it's a learned behavior. So that one's more behavior driven. And that people pleasing, oh, it really is more about wanting or needing that attention that makes you feel like you are important or that you matter.
Yeah.
So I find that oftentimes a lot of people pleasers lack that I matter ownership, like
Yeah.
owning that they matter. And so a way to then offset that is to be the hero in everyone's story.
Yes, it's like, oh, I'm allergic to cats, but yes, I'm going to take your cats for 2 weeks because you're on
Exactly.
vacation.
Yes,
Well, you were not
exactly.
even asking me on top of that, and I
No.
volunteered. Oh, yeah, trust me, I've been there. I know. It's funny because I recognize myself in the driver, I recognize myself in the people pleaser,
Yeah,
and I'm sure I'm going to recognize myself in the one lacking confidence. I guess it's
yeah.
different parts of myself, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's why they're the three common in
Yes.
high achieving women, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
know.
the lack of confidence will be, I assume, someone who doesn't want to really show their accomplishments or who's not sure that they're good enough to succeed, maybe afraid to sell or things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it is. And being a high achiever, it's hard with that lack of confidence one
Hmm.
because it also tends to come from a place of not feeling smart enough
Mm.
or feeling stupid or like I don't want to fail. And if I fail, that's not okay.
Mm.
So it like makes you recoil and not
Yeah.
have that bold, open confidence that's authentic anyways. Sometimes it
Yes.
more
Yes,
feels
exactly.
like
Authentic.
I'm
Yeah.
yeah, I'm forcing myself to show up or say something or do something. And nobody would ever know that I have the lack of confidence. But inside, it's just like, ugh,
Yeah.
I'm like
Dreadful.
dying inside. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because I think when you're learning a new task or where you're pushing yourself a little bit, you're going to be at that place. But you're really
Mhm.
talking about a pattern, something where
Yes.
you're always feeling that way, not just when,
Yes.
okay, you're just started to, I don't know, play tennis. I'm taking that example because I started
Exactly.
playing not that long ago. And it's like at the beginning, you're like, oh, but
Uh-huh.
but then, you're just like, it becomes the new normal.
Yeah.
Well, what you're talking, it's like constantly feeling, oh my God, I have to. And it's not necessarily overcompensate. It's just that inside you have that whole kind of.
Yes. Exactly.
Hmm, very
Exactly.
interesting. So the ladies, and I'm sorry, I'm saying ladies, but the woman entrepreneur
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
working with you. So usually, do they come from a very specific industry? Do they have a background in common, or do they find their way to you? And do you see, I would say, a thread that works very well with your method, kind of?
Yeah. Um, I've been a life coach for 21 years.
Mm.
So it's been a long time. I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
that ages me now that I say that every time. Um, but so I am well known in more of like the health and well-being industry, like functional medicine
Mhm.
and nutrition,
Yeah,
and other coaches too. But then I also work a lot with network marketers who still fall under like the health and wellness, like
of course.
supplements
Mhm.
and oils and things like that.
That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense actually, because we
Hmm.
tend to forget, well, they're entrepreneurs. It's
Yeah.
so many entrepreneurs, if you think about it, people who are franchise, people who are doing MLM, all of it, and you're like, wow,
Yep.
all of creators, all of that are
Yes.
independents. And but what's very funny is that if you tell them they're entrepreneur, they don't necessarily see it that way.
Exactly. And it is. You are
Yeah,
your business. So
yeah.
that makes you an entrepreneur.
It's
Yes.
this idea of to qualify for the world of entrepreneur, you need to have a
Yes.
staff. Maybe you need to have. I used to be a venture capitalist. You need to have raised money. You need to, like
Yes.
you need your offices. You need a
Yes.
logo. Like so. There is this mindset that I think is. I don't know if entrepreneur might not be the right word. Maybe we should call it independent. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's very interesting. So you mentioned your 180 method, going back really to being versus, doing.
Hmm.
One of the question I had was about how do you make it manageable for your clients? So is it a lot of small steps where they finally change that identity and align with their authentic self, or do you do that?
Yeah, it is. It's small steps, just it nothing that sticks long term happens very quickly.
Exactly.
Right? It is that it's like a crash course diet. That doesn't work very well.
Hmm.
You're good for however long you're on the diet, but then you fall off if it
Yeah.
goes too
Yeah.
quickly. So it is more of a process,
Hmm.
the methods, and it's taken pieces, piece by piece, to get to that core root cause. And then once the healing is being done there at that level, then it happens very quickly after
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Then that's
Yeah.
so. Would you have, I don't know, two or three tips for people who are listening and might be thinking, oh, what could be these little steps I can start maybe implementing to go in that
Mm,
healing direction?
very good. Okay, one of them, I am such a big proponent of ownership.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is like really taking ownership of the life you've lived, what is coming up,
yeah,
um, how you've created things into your life. We spend so much time complaining and blaming other people, and don't even realize it.
yeah,
So taking ownership of anything that is occurring in your life, for example, the people pleasing, just acknowledging that of like, I am a people pleaser and
yeah.
taking ownership of it, but then looking at why. Why are you the people
Yes.
pleaser
Hmm.
would be important. And
Hmm.
then the last part is what do I get out of being a people
Yeah,
pleaser?
yeah,
So there's that ownership of
exactly.
that's what you are and what your personality currently is, and then why you have that, and then what it gives you.
Yeah, I think, like the what it gives you is a piece we
Mm,
tend to forget, because we tend to think, absolutely, there is nothing I gain by acting like that. And I'm always like, maybe you feel safe because
yeah,
by not putting yourself out there, I don't know, maybe you're not doing social media, or maybe you're afraid to call a client or push back. Well,
yeah,
it keeps you safe, so
yes,
there is, and it's the thread behind the thread. So
yes,
you think it's this, and then if you continue the inquiry, you realize that actually it's something underneath,
something
underneath,
deeper.
underneath.
Yes.
So how long do you work with clients usually for them to also kind of unknit all of that?
Good question. So I personally work with just one-on-one clients now for 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I train coaches in this method. So the other coaches do group sessions that are
Gotcha.
3 months.
Got you. Got you. Got you. Got
Yeah.
you. Okay. Okay. And I guess depending as well, because the way I look at it is that we go from level to level. Like you're
Yes.
not going to transform into a mix of a Dalai Lama, Serena Williams, Hillary Clinton. Like it's your next level.
Yes.
And your next
Exactly.
level is not my next level, is not my girlfriend's next level. And that's also
Right.
what we need to understand.
Yeah, exactly. And that next level, you always want to be going to that next level, but the
Mm,
next level will reveal what needs to be healed. Like these things will come up
exactly.
again in the next
Exactly.
level. And that's
Exactly.
why it's so important that the change and the decision of change too is very important.
Hmm.
There's here's another tool of to give. There's a difference between deciding and choosing.
Okay.
A decision, the word decide actually comes from the Latin word side, which means to kill off.
Okay.
So when you decide, you kill off every other option.
Oh, I love it. So it's really your commitment. That means
That's it. There's
now I'm a
no,
vegetarian. I'm not, that's my
exactly.
personality. I'm not
Yeah.
eating meat, fish anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. A choice. Well, one day you can decide, oh, I think I'll eat meat today. And then
Hmm.
tomorrow it's, I don't feel like it. I'm gonna. So there's
Hmm.
a lot more flexibility when you
Yeah.
choose.
Hmm.
We need to focus on the decision when you're
Love that.
deciding to heal. There has to be that level of commitment. Otherwise, the work will be work.
Hmm.
And it'll be this one foot in and one foot out, which never goes well.
Hmm. And it's interesting because you mentioned ownership, you mentioned decision.
Yeah.
It's very empowering. At the same time, it
Mhm.
can look scary because you're like,
Oh yeah.
oh, no, that means
Yes.
I have to decide. That means I'm killing off my options, and
Yeah.
on top of that, I'm taking ownership. It's a bit like, but it's like at some point I had to do a very difficult diet to kill off some. Well, long story short, I'm not going to go
Yeah.
there. But so for 5 weeks, no sugar, no
Yeah.
gluten, no lactose. I mean, like basically, you could just eat greens, but I looked at it as empowering. I was like,
Mm,
no, I don't want to look at it as I'm depriving myself. I want to look
right.
at it as I'm giving me that gift of committing, of taking the decision that no, I'm going to stick on that diet. So I think it's also the perspective. Do you see that as well with your clients?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you've decided that perspective is so much more easeful to hold on to.
Yeah.
There might still be moments of like, oh, well, I really would love a piece of chocolate cake, but it's like, yeah, actually, no, not like I think I want it, but I really don't. So
Yeah.
when the decision is made, that it just makes it so much easier to continue moving forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And after, it's really about these habits as well. So it's not
Hmm.
necessarily
Hmm.
something you want, but you're just so used to that. So do
Yes.
you, to make it easier for your clients when they made the decision to actually, well, um, show this willpower every day, do you advise them to, I don't know, change their environment for a while or change a little bit? Because I find sometimes when you're stuck in the same environment, it's a bit difficult to change your
Yeah.
thoughts, your habits, and all of that. So, do they do a bit of that as well?
No, because they may be in a situation where, like, for example, their marriage, but they
Oh,
can't
yeah. Okay.
necessarily leave
Okay.
their marriage in that sense, and it's they're gonna have to confront that part of their lives anyhow. And so better to just be walking
Do it.
through it while they're in their active everyday life. And do things start to like drop off or be eliminated? Yes, always
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
you are on a path of
Yeah.
growth. Relationships end,
Yes.
habits end, things that you normally thought you never would stop have do stop. But it naturally happens versus them having to kind of force themselves to do it.
Okay. Okay. So it's
Yeah,
not necessarily, okay, I'm going to drop that relationship because when I'm in that relationship, I always do the wrong thing. It's more, I
exactly.
stop doing the wrong thing and that relationship by itself kind of
Kind of,
died down. Hmm.
Exactly.
Very interesting. And I want to finish on something. I want to finish on two things. I want to talk about burnout, and then I want to talk about where people can find you. So,
Okay.
burnout, you started with that entrepreneur can really
That's right.
run themselves to the ground, like we were talking about the
Yeah.
driver, the ultra
Yeah.
driver. So what would be some strategy to avoid burnout, or maybe red flag? Because I've noticed a lot of women don't realize they're burnt out. They're so
Mhm.
used to running on empty until it's really, really bad. So any insights on burnout?
Recognizing that you're in burnout can be hard because like you're saying you're in just do that's that do mode, the
Hmm.
human do mode, and there's not a presence when you're in that space. So a good way to know if you are in that space is to take a present moment, like decide I'm going to take the next minute and just like sit here for the minute. And if you can't sit in just no thoughts, no activity, like you're kind of like, oh, I need to check my phone or I need to do this. Or if you're not able to sit in that 1 minute, that is a good indication that you
Hmm.
are heading into burnout.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So that's a good way to know. Getting out of burnout then would start with the decision of I need to stop what I've been doing. But oftentimes, even the burnout comes from the driver, so there is a payoff to it. And if you're not
Yeah.
willing to sacrifice or kill off that payoff, like the need to have it is greater than the need to not,
Hmm.
that's why you're going to keep burning yourself
Yeah.
out too.
Yeah. That's when you
Yeah.
need to, your point, go back to start with the healing. Because
Yes.
otherwise you're working on the symptom and not the
Right.
cause. And I see that all the time. You're talking burnout and people comment with self-care. And I'm like, it's not
Mm,
taking a bath. That's
no.
gonna change your
No.
addiction to be
Yes,
validated with external signs of success or whatever validation means for you,
exactly.
So yeah, this self-care thing, I love self-care, don't get me wrong, but I'm like, okay, it's a bit like a nice coat of paint on maybe some detritus,
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you so much for that perspective. So I'm sure everyone who's listening is very excited. Where can they find the Baller coach? Where can they find Alejandra?
Very good. The best way is on Instagram under the Baller Coach.
Okay.
But that's anywhere you can find me under the Baller Coach. But Instagram is the place where I do most, and YouTube.
Okay.
So those are the two.
So people can also benefit, I would say, before working with you from your insights and, some tips and tricks and techniques
Yes.
and
Yes.
elevated thoughts. That's fabulous. Do you have some final thoughts you want to share with our audience on what you're doing or anything you want to share?
Yeah. I think the final insight is that I've been thinking about this a lot coming towards the end of the year. And, we're gearing up to finish the year and then starting our new year. And typically, starting the new year, people have a renewed sense of, okay, it's a new year, fresh start. And oftentimes, the things that you think you need to do are not the things that you need to be
Oh, I
doing.
love that.
And so if you could like just take a moment to think about what it is you think you need, and then look at it from a 180 perspective. Shift it into what would be the opposite of that? What would be a directional shift of those things? And most likely what you really need is the directional shift versus what you
Oh.
think you need.
Oh, I know I'm going to do some journaling as we
Hmm.
finish this interview because
Yeah.
you really put, an interesting thought in my mind about, okay, this usual like list. And in fact, our usually list of to-dos, let's be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And it's really very inspirational. It's just
Yeah.
an extension of our to-do list, but looking at it from the other side and what it means. I really, really like it. Well, thank you so
So
much,
welcome.
Alejandra.
Thank
It was
you. My pleasure.
fabulous to chat. And
Likewise.
you know what? I'm really looking forward to staying in touch and seeing more of you on my Instagram because I'm following you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you again for your time today.
Likewise.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.